there's been some fundamental shifts in religion in the public square. I'm wondering, is there a way to go back and undo Abington School District versus Shemp from 1963, which I think most people think that means state stays in its corner and church stays in its corner, and we're all happy. We know that our founders were not that way. They had their religious views in the center of government, and that the government was not to go meddle in the affairs of the church. I think that you can look at that watershed moment and that case decision and look at America's history from that point on and how we became a secular society and how everything fell from there. And so with these two cases, Shurtleff versus the city of Boston and the Coach Kennedy case, it sounded like there were 6,000 that were based on the limit test. You're going back and relitigating those or looking ways to undo those. Is Abington School District versus Shemp one of those things that could fall under that activity?
Yeah, and I'll just take that real quick because I want to echo what my former colleague said, is that this is a place of hope, because in a lot of other areas in our country, we feel like we're losing battles. In the religious liberty, especially in the courts, we're actually gaining ground all the time. So we had his unanimous case. You had our case in 2022. In 2023, First Liberty had a case that was unanimous by the Supreme Court in the Groff case that allowed a postal worker to have a religious accommodation on Sundays. ADF had a very huge decision in 303 Creative just last year on you can't force somebody to design a website for a same-sex marriage ceremony if they don't want to. That's a violation of their religious beliefs. The same year Kennedy was decided, we had another case Supreme Court called which had to do with school choice in Maine, which said you can't, you can use those public dollars for religious purposes. You can't discriminate on that if you do it for other places. So we're starting to not only get some good rulings, but some good opinions. And these guys can tell you sometimes you get the result that you want, but the opinion isn't that strong. But we're starting to get really strong opinions. And I think now that this court has gone back to the history and tradition test, we can unwind a lot of those things that started in the 40s, went to the 50s, 60s, 70s, that kind of set up this wall of separation that we know it. I think you can, because if you go back and look at the history and tradition of America, those were intertwined, right? You saw that, the Northwest Ordinance. You go back to everything, that education was a part of a Christian religious system. And so I think you can see a light at the end of that tunnel. You just got to get the cases up there. It's got to be the right ones with the right fact patterns. But with this court especially, and with the test that they're promulgating, I absolutely think you can unwind that at some point.
Let me riff off of that as well. With the history and traditions test, all is possible at this point. It is a sea change that we have seen since we're no longer under the Warren Court. All can be questioned based on this current court and this makeup. So I encourage legislators, where you have the majority, be aggressive. I mean, look at how the different cases on apportionment from the 1960s and onward ended up, where saying that the guarantee clause requires the Reynolds versus Sims, where you're having the redistricting drawn by federal judges and striking down state apportionment schemes that exactly mirror the U.S. government's apportionment scheme. Rhode Island has 2 senators, California has 2 senators. Attacks on bad cases like that can be used to bolster future majorities. We don't have to have Chicago dominate Illinois. We don't have to have New York City dominating New York State. This new court and a return to a history and traditions test calls everything bad into question. And then when you're addressing controversial pieces of legislation, controversial, New York Times, the Associated Press that like to beat you up, I cannot express enough how important it is to have concerted efforts around the country where you're all running similar bills, so they cannot, using the Alinsky tactic of isolate, polarize, and destroy one individual crazy senator or representative. You've got the whole side of our side of the issue, a diffuse target that they cannot laser in on and zero in on, and it causes them to have to expend resources in a broad swath where we can push things through in 1 or 2 states and then advance these majority and historic and traditional positions.